part of the pre-MD interest group here at CU School of Medicine. I'm a first year, and as you can see here, we're going to be talking about the secondary application today. We've had a few other presentations that kind of covered an overview of the application and then the MCAT and the primary. And for me, the secondary is kind of like a sneaky part of the application that actually takes way more effort than I expected. And I think it really plays a big role in how the med school sees you. Down here, once we share this presentation, there's a link to our other seminars that you can go back and review if you weren't able to attend those. And here we go. Okay, first off, I meant to say this. You can throw any of your questions into the chat. We have other members of our interest group on there that can answer as we go. Feel free to unmute. You're not going to upset me if you interrupt me. I'd love to hear your questions. And then at the end, do this presentation for about 35 to 40 minutes. And then I really want to leave a large chunk of time for us to do the small groups where you'll be paired up with some pre-MD students at CU, and you can really just talk about your personal story and kind of get some advice. So to start us off here, this is our survey. We really appreciate it if you fill this out now, and then we have a post presentation survey. It really helps us improve our seminars, and then also you'll be entered into a raffle for an AAMC question pack, which is a ton of questions and it'll save you some cash. So I'm going to go ahead and give us 5 minutes. So we'll go until actually, 6 minutes, about 6:10 for everyone to fill this out and get started with the presentation. Oops, sorry. About 1 more minute and then we'll get rolling. Okay, hopefully everyone had a chance to complete that survey. We really, really appreciate it. Thanks to those who did. And let's get on to our stuff here. Okay, so first for an interview, here's just a brief and broad overview of the application cycle. We've done the MCAT, we've done a primary application seminar, and now we're going to focus on the secondary applications or secondaries, and then the judgment tests. So, really important, what is a secondary? It is basically a set of essays that you're going to be writing for the school, for a specific school. So the school chooses these anywhere from, I feel like some schools would have 3 to some schools would have like 10, and 10 would be like way shorter essays, and maybe 3 would be a little more dense. But it's all up to the school, and it's really just their way to get to know you past your primary application. Kind of like that second layer of you, a time for you to tell the school how you're unique. Some of these prompts are more broad and general, like, like what is a big challenge that you've been through and how did you overcome that? And then some of them are more school specific, like, how are you going to fit into our mission, or why our school is a really popular one. So the order kind of goes, you do your primary, you do your secondary, along with your situational judgment test, and then you go into interview, and then hopefully another arrow to acceptance. So for the timeline, kind of what I just went over briefly there. So you send out your primary, and then once you are cleared by the school, whether they do a quick screening of like minimum GPA and MCAT, or however they choose to do their screenings, it's very school specific, then they'll send out they'll invite you to complete their secondary application. Sometimes this is really quick turnaround, like 2 weeks. Sometimes schools take a little longer to process those, and it could be closer to 4 weeks, but they typically all kind of roll in anywhere, from July to the end of August. And for me, they really just kind of sprinkled in, I would get like 2 to 3 a week, and it really depends on how many schools you're applying to. Cost of applying, such a big part of it that, you kind of forget about until you start putting your card number in constantly. We went over the primary application part. For secondaries, they do vary from about $50 to $150. I would say $150 seems a little high. Most of mine were about $100. I think a lot of a good average is $75 a school, and then you can kind of get a good estimate of what you're going to be spending. The biggest part here is that total costs are going to be in the thousands. And I want to show you real quick. I liked using this website, Medical School Headquarters or Medical School HQ. They have a medical school application cost estimator. So I go down here, you can put in how many schools MD, let's say you apply to 10 MD. You're applying to 5, or, let's do 7 DO and no Texas schools. Then you put in your nearest airport location. So I live in Denver. And then they just go through and show you estimates, like here's your primary estimated cost. Here's your secondary. They use $75 as their estimate. So they said $12.75 for their estimated secondary cost. Estimated travel cost. This part's a little confusing right now because I know this cycle is still via Zoom. I hope that it stays via Zoom. I think it makes it way more accessible for applicants, and you can really accept way more interviews. So hopefully it stays virtual, and then these travel costs can remain 0. And then at the bottom, it kind of gives you your total estimated cost. This is, pretty high with the travel costs, but it's something to look at. All right, back to our presentation here. The AAMC's Fee Assistant Program is a great program. The only con about it is that it does take a while for it to process. So make sure as soon as it's open for your cycle, if you're planning to use that, get your application in. It usually takes, your tax information, your parents, if you want to include that, depending on your situation, and then you want to make sure that's processed right along with your primary application. So you're not waiting to get moving and you're waiting on this. So it's a really great way to save a lot of money, and it also waives a lot of those secondary fees. All right, how do we approach these things? First off, where can you find the prompts? A lot of schools will reuse their prompts year to year, and maybe they keep 3 of the same and they change up 2. Either way, here are some resources here that the prompts are posted, which can help you in pre-writing, which we'll get into now. Okay. How do we finish all of these on time? This is kind of a scary thing to think about, because let's say you apply to 20 schools, and then you get invited back to probably, if your primary is mildly strong, you get invited back to these secondaries. And so then you have 20 secondaries to complete, and it just can be a really big time burden, especially if you're working full time, or maybe you're taking care of a family, or you're a student. So a big way to help this is pre-writing those responses. And that's from getting the prompts from those resources on the previous slide. And you can definitely pre-write. You can pre-write for specific schools, but a lot of those prompts you're going to be able to use on your other secondaries. There's a lot of those more general, tell me about a challenge, tell me about a time that you were a leader. Those you can really tailor and change up, but still use that same experience and kind of expedite the process a little bit. So pre-writing, you can use it for a lot of different schools. And then a big point here is to keep a spreadsheet of when you're invited from the school, because the general rule of thumb is to return your secondary within 2 weeks of receiving it, from the date that you received it. And I always recommend to prioritize your secondaries on your top schools. So let's say that going into it, these are my 3 top schools. As soon as I get those secondaries, they were my top priority. And I turned most of those in within like 7 days. I didn't even go the full 2 weeks. Now, some other schools, it definitely got closer to like 3 weeks, 3.5 weeks, but those ones that your top schools, you really want to make sure you get those back in a timely fashion. And then other than your top schools, just doing it on a rolling basis. So as you get them, try and get them back within 2 weeks. If you can't, just, do it as soon as you can. What do you write about? Probably the most important part of this presentation is you want to answer the question that they're asking you. It seems like a very simple concept, but it's so easy to get, taken up in your writing, and you're trying to reuse an essay that you already used, and you kind of miss the whole point of it. You want to make sure you answer the question so they can use that, and it can, work positively in your application. If not, it's just going to be a wash. So answer the question they ask you. And then this is something I really don't think I use. I applied twice, and I think I really struggled on my first cycle, was elaborate on any experiences or activities that you didn't get a chance to share details about in your primary. So it's fine if you mentioned them in your primary, but maybe you didn't go into a lot of detail, or you listed this experience as an activity, but it wasn't your most important activity, or I think that's what it's called, your most important. So this is a time to save up those experiences, save up those stories, and use them here on the secondaries. Kind of leave them guessing a little bit on that primary, show them what you're about, and then you can really use the stories that you saved up on your secondaries. And then you want a little bit more for your interview too. So it's okay to spread those out. I think I just put it all into my primary to start with, and then I just kind of ran out, and I had pretty poor secondaries on my first cycle. For your answers, you want to show that you're unique. So just be yourself. Write about things that you're passionate about, that you care about, and that really make you you. And then this is a theme that was really popular, or really something to follow for your primary as well, is to show, don't tell. So if you want to say, in our example here, if you want to say that you're well-equipped to handle high pressure and stressful situations, you need to say why you're well-equipped. Or you're compassionate about X, you want to say why. So they don't want to just hear these things that you are. You have to demonstrate why you hold those things about yourself. Okay. Whenever we're talking about this pre-writing, that's kind of what this slide is getting into here. It's nice to have, and you can start this during your primary application and kind of carry it throughout. Have a document somewhere that you just kind of jot down experiences that are meaningful to you, that play a role into why you're going into medicine, and then just anything that you're passionate about. Pre-write those, and you don't have to write the full essay. Just write, jot down a few notes about it, and then whenever you're going to use it for an essay, that's when you can really develop that thought. But it's good to have a document, and then to look at, a big point is to look at the mission or vision statements from the school itself. And I always took those and I copied them and I put them on my same document that I was writing my secondary on. It's just good to see how their values, and you want to align with their values. So always good to review that whenever you're writing. And it also helps if you're kind of struggling to get going, to kind of look at what they think is important and incorporate that into your secondary. These are some example prompts. We're not going to go through all of them, just these bolded ones that are super important. And I want to make a quick comment on, most of these prompts are limited to character number or word limit. You're more than welcome to use all of the, whatever you're allowed, but I wouldn't fluff it up to fill that limit. If you're at 175 words and the limit was 200, I'm not going to push it to get to that limit. That's not what they want to see. Answer the question, say what you want to say, and then let it be. You don't have to fill up that space. One of the biggest ones here, and we're going to get into these, is explain why you decided to apply to X School of Medicine. That's like the most popular one. And it makes sense, right? They just want to know why you want to go there. Here it is, why our school, and how we're going to write about that. Like I said, this is the most common secondary prompt, and you have to do some research on the school. And I would say this is important for all of your secondaries, obviously, but it's very important for your top schools that you really want to go to. Do your research, not only just browsing through, the first few pages of their website, but kind of dive in a little deeper. Try and find out what the school is about. It's good to check out their Instagram to see what they're doing right now, if there's any new program they started, or maybe they're highlighting a certain research that they're proud about. Just do your research, it'll pay off. And then still use that show and tell approach. This is a great example here that our materials team put together. This is a student who worked as a scribe in an endocrinology clinic, and then they connected that with research that's being done at CU's Barbara Davis Center for Diabetes. So that's how you can connect your experiences to what the school has to offer and how you're gonna add to that. Diversity prompt, also very, very popular. A lot of schools are building up and really focusing on their diversity and inclusion committees. And this can be anything that makes you unique. These are great examples here: cultural background, academic background, hobbies, personality traits. I know I spoke a lot about being a first-generation college student and kind of how that's kind of shaped my application experience. So this is anything that makes you unique. And this is something you can kind of pre-write about too, and just jot down and have some thoughts. And because I would say this is almost guaranteed to be on at least half of your secondaries. Adversity. So this is the general question. Tell us about a time that you were challenged. Tell us about a time that you failed and how you overcame that. Some big points on this is discuss what you learned from this challenge and how you grew from it. I had to take the MCAT a few times, so I spoke about that on a few of my essays, and what changed from getting my first score to the score that I applied with. And a really big point here is that you don't want to the essay should not focus on blaming external factors. That's not what they want to hear. They want to hear how you're going to be a better doctor, a better student, a better person, a better teammate from the challenge. They don't really care about if there was blame or any fault in the challenge itself. And what makes your secondary good? We all want a good secondary, right? We want it to be strong. Brevity and clarity. You have to keep it concise. I just went to our admissions dinner last night, and they gave the numbers for CU this year, and they invited 5,000 applicants to their secondary. So the admissions committee, the people who volunteer for them, they're reading through thousands of these secondaries. So they don't want to hear a bunch of fluff. They want you to get to the point, answer the question, and move on to the next one. Personalization, like we've been saying, keep it unique. Make sure it is personal to yourself. And then relevance, answer the question. You have to start there. Whenever you're kind of reviewing your prompts, make sure you answer the question that they asked, because sometimes the questions can be a little broad, or some of the prompts can be a little long. So just really ensure that you're answering what they want. Diversity and humanism, we went over that. Attention to detail. I think this is a really good point. You don't want any spelling or grammatical errors. It kind of shows some carelessness, even though you probably put so much effort into it. It's just a really easy way to make them pay attention, that you're not going to have a grammatical error, and that's going to come with your editing and having other people look over your essays. Honesty and integrity. Just like your primary, you can't be exaggerating or faking anything on these. These are really smart people reading through it, and it's not a good characteristic to have as a person, as a med student, as a physician, etc. So they have to be honest. And the whole goal of these is to tell them and show them, not only tell, right? We have to show who you are and why you are an ideal candidate for that particular medical school. Editing. It's okay to write a lot of drafts of these. It's really great to, especially if you have time to be pre-writing, you want to workshop these. You want them to really flow and sound like yourself. So write multiple drafts. And then number 2, find a trusted mentor or friend to help you edit your responses. This, I think, is what changed for my 2 application cycles. My first one, I think I looked over it and maybe one other person did one time, but my second one, I found a good friend that had been an English literature major, and I've always really struggled with writing and grammar and all of that stuff. So she was a huge help. And a big point is that you have to be able to receive criticism from this person. So I had my boyfriend read through a few of my secondaries, and it was helpful, but if he criticized it too much, I was just like, you're being mean. And that wasn't helpful. So to have my friend Katie, who reviewed all of my stuff, I could really take criticism from her. If she was like, oh, I don't think this sounds right, I don't think we need this, let's reword this. I didn't take it personally. And I think it really helped with the process. So make sure it's a person that you're ready to hear some criticism about. And it feels personal because it's about you, but it makes a big difference in your application. And then read it out loud. I always did this before I went and sent my stuff over to Katie. It just really shows, you get to hear what it's going to sound like to the people reading it, and you can really check out the flow and if anything sounds kind of weird. So read it out loud is a really helpful tip. So these are tips that we've kind of already went over. I want to give this time for any of the other pre-MD members that are here. If you have any specific tips or any stories about your experience with secondaries, please chime in and share those.
I can give a tip or like a thing that I used while I was doing this. Everything that Morgan said, I think, was like really true. But something that I also had to do, and I don't know if Morgan already touched on this, but like, don't be like, I know she touched on like the turnaround time and you want to make sure that you're getting the secondaries back in. But just also like give yourself time to like walk away from these things. That was a really big thing that I like didn't do in the beginning, and I just felt myself getting like kind of flustered. And when you're writing the same thing, and like Morgan said, like a lot of these prompts are very similar, and so like when you're constantly day in and day out like writing responses to this and they're very similar responses, it's like really easy to kind of be like, oh, this is like a bad response, but really you sent it to somebody and they're like, no, this is a really good one. You've just been seeing this like answer so many times that you kind of like are desensitized to it. So I would say like also don't be afraid to like take the day off. You're like, I'm not gonna work on this anymore, like I'm gonna go do something fun and kind of just like, refresh yourself, because as you could probably tell based off this presentation and others, like applying to medical school is like kind of a marathon in and of itself. So yeah, just like I would say the big thing for me is just like making sure you're taking some time to step away, so that every time you are writing a new essay or response, it's like a fresh, like exciting new thing. Because like it's very clear to tell when somebody's writing something and they're like not passionate about it, or like they're kind of over it. So just make sure that you're always kind of putting your best into whatever you're writing and taking care of yourself.
Thanks, Jacob. That was super helpful. Anybody else want to share? If not, we can just move it on. All right, let's do it. While Jacob was talking too, I actually thought of give yourself some time after you turn in that primary before, like you have time because schools can't get back to you, but between your primary and the pre-writing, give yourself some time. You just work so hard in the primary. It's okay to take a solid week off before you start getting into this pre-writing. And I didn't pre-write. I was working full time and I was honestly so burnt from the primary. So I don't think it's a end all be all if you can't pre-write, but it definitely would have saved some stress during that secondary time. So I recommend it, but it's not the end of the world if you don't have time to do it. Okay, do's and don'ts. We went over a lot of the do's, so I'm going to focus on a few don'ts. That first one, mistakenly copy the wrong response into a question prompt or have grammatical errors. We chatted about the grammatical errors, fix those. They're going to look careless. You can prevent those. Mistakenly copying the wrong response. All of these secondaries come with like a different link on like a random website, it feels like. And so it's just kind of confusing whenever you're copy and pasting your response, because you usually take them all and put them into like a Word document or a Google Doc, however you choose, and then you copy and paste onto this website. So before you hit submit at the bottom, do a good scroll through. It's going to take you 3 minutes and it's going to save you from looking so silly if one of your prompts is misplaced. Also, for one of mine, I answered a prompt at the top, and then at the bottom they had share anything else that you'd like with us or something like that. And I had a prompt. I was like, oh wait, this is like a fun story. They're gonna like this. So I copy and pasted it. And before I submitted, I had already used that prompt earlier in the same application. And like that would have been so silly and looked super careless on my part. So that's also going to help you if you do a quick read through. Even though it's so tempting to just hit submit and forget about it, it's worth your time. Don't write a different school's name in another essay. They know that we're reusing these, but you don't want to make it that obvious. So again, editing a quick read through could really save you. It could save you possibly an interview if they're going to take it that poorly. And then I think that's it, that we covered it. And we can't lie or exaggerate. That's pretty straightforward. These are just characteristics of a medical student. AAMC posts these on their website. I think it's a good time or a good resource if you want to use to brainstorm some experiences or you're kind of struggling to think of anything else. Going through these can kind of help you. Okay, moving on to the second part here, and we're doing good on time. These are the situational judgment tests. So there's 3 right now: CASPer, Duet, and Preview. These seem to keep multiplying. So this is for this cycle, this is what we have. This could change by next year. I have personally done the CASPer and the Duet, but this is my first time ever hearing of the Preview. So we're going to go through each of these briefly. CASPer, and it says Altus Suite. That is just the website that both of these are on. If you Google CASPer or the Altus Suite, it's going to pop up. For CASPer, they're mostly looking for, it's called a situational judgment test. So they're looking at your professionalism and then also collaboration, problem solving, and ethics. So basically they kind of give you like a video or a dilemma that's written out. Like a good example is Jacob cheated on his test. What are you going to do next? It's like a very vague example, but that's kind of the theme of it. They're going to give you questions and it's open response. So you're typing these out and you get 5 minutes. Luckily, this is not graded on grammar. They know that it's a time thing, but you want to make sure that it's coherent enough for them to understand what you're trying to say. So here's some sample scenarios. I'll let everyone read on their own. And then a big point is that they have full practice tests of the CASPer that you can take before taking the actual one, which I think is super helpful. It'll let you see the layout of the test and kind of practice what that 5 minutes is going to feel like and what the questions are going to be like. So there's a good example here. You catch your classmate cheating on an exam and they really want you to not answer what you would do, but why you would do that. So why you would report so-and-so to your, dean, or why you would just talk to the person instead. You want to back up. You want them to hear your thought process. That's the main point of it. And I don't know if this is wrong, but I feel like for the CASPer, because I took this, if you do like, if you score in like the middle to the high range, I think it's great. I don't think it's like a big deal if you're just in the middle. I think whenever you get low, that's when it becomes a little bit more concerning. But really just answer these, be yourself. I'm sure everyone is ethical. So just, I want to put a lot of stress on these, but you definitely want to put forth your effort whenever you're doing them. The duet is more of a value alignment assessment. So this is a little different. I recommend going with your gut on these and just like being yourself. Because I think someone told me this whenever I was applying, there's a lot of great medical schools, but you want to find the medical school that's great for you. You want your values to align. You don't want to like change your values to match your top school, which, you know, is tempting. I don't know if you could fool the duet, but you want to align with your school because that's, you know, that's where you want to be happy there. You're going to be there for 4 years. So that's a duet. And here's our preview. So this is a big professionalism. Well, it says it, professional readiness exam. So this is what they're looking at. I'm going to go to the next slide here. This is an example of what the scenarios look like. So just another professionalism way to kind of test you. I don't have any experience with the preview. If someone else does from PMD, I'm sure they can chime in. But it feels kind of similar to the CASPer to me. Okay, great. 6:34. If everyone that is still in attendance, if you could complete